Upon assuming office, the Trump administration promptly initiated an unprecedented series of political maneuvers. These actions sparked widespread concern and change across the globe. In response to the recent escalation of tariffs imposed by the United States, China retaliated with a decisive economic counterstrike. Beijing implemented additional tariffs on selected U.S. agricultural goods, tightened scrutiny of trade operations involving specific American firms, and suspended certain import activities. This retaliatory move further intensified the ongoing trade war between the world's two largest economies. Trade disputes with neighboring countries and tariffs imposed on long-standing allies were just the beginning. The Trump administration's aggressive approach prompted a reevaluation of international economic and diplomatic relations. Strained relations between the United States and its NATO allies, the temporary cessation of support for Ukraine, and heightened tensions in key geopolitical hotspots further undermined global stability. Amidst this turbulent environment, the trade war with China emerged as a pivotal event. This ongoing economic conflict disrupted global supply chains, destabilized various industries, and amplified volatility in financial markets, compelling businesses and governments to adapt to increasingly unpredictable economic conditions. The evolution of the trade standoff between the world's two largest economies began with President Trump's Executive Order 14195, signed on February 1, 2025. This document established a 10% tariff on all goods imported from China, effective from February 4. This measure formed part of a broader strategy aimed at rectifying existing trade imbalances and safeguarding the interests of American manufacturers. The head of state acknowledged that such measures might provoke some discontent among American consumers. However, in his view, the necessity of protecting national interests justified the potential costs. China's response was swift. On February 10, 2025, Beijing introduced its own tariffs, 15% on American coal and liquefied natural gas and 10% on oil and agricultural machinery. On March 3 of the same year, the Trump administration further escalated the conflict by increasing tariffs on Chinese products from 10% to 20%. The objective of this decision was to intensify pressure on China to address issues related to trade policy and the protection of intellectual property rights. The U.S. president justified the escalation by citing the need to protect American industry and reduce the trade deficit between the two countries. In response to the escalating trade tensions and tariff increases imposed by the U.S., China announced decisive retaliatory measures. On March 4, 2025, it was announced that additional tariffs would be imposed on a wide range of American agricultural products, a direct response to Washington's actions. The new tariffs took effect on March 10, 2025, encompassing key U.S. export commodities. Among the most significant measures was the introduction of a 15% tariff on American chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton. Furthermore, Chinese authorities imposed a 10% tariff on American sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, aquatic products, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. This move dealt a significant blow to American producers and exporters targeting the Chinese market. In addition to tariff measures, China took steps to tighten control over the activities of American companies within its territory. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce added 10 American firms to its list of unreliable entities, resulting in the imposition of various restrictions. The list included Act 1 Federal, Cubic Corporation, Exova Huntington, Engels Industries Inc., Planet Management Group, S3 Arity Defense, Stickrutter Enterprises LLC, TCOM Limited Partnership, Teline Brown Engineering Inc., and Techstore. This decision served as a further indication of Beijing's readiness to protect its economic interests and respond to actions it deemed unfriendly. Inclusion on this list carries serious consequences for businesses, paving the way for bans on trade and investment in China. This will undoubtedly affect the activities of companies seeking to establish a foothold in the Chinese market. The recent addition of 15 American companies from the defense and technology sectors to China's export control list further underscored this point. Such designation restricts the export of dual-use goods, thereby limiting access to Chinese markets and advanced technologies. In turn, China suspended imports of American timber and revoked import licenses for soybeans for 3 American companies, CHS Inc., Louis Fuss Company Grains Merchandising LLC, and EGT. The authorities explained this decision with concerns about pollution. These steps are part of China's broader strategy to reduce reliance on agricultural imports from the U.S. and bolster food security by diversifying sources and increasing domestic production. China's targeted approach specifically addresses agricultural exports from the United States, a sector already heavily impacted by previous trade disputes. By imposing tariffs on products like soybeans, pork, and beef, China aims to pressure American farmers whose voices carry significant weight in the country's political landscape. The inclusion of leading American corporations on lists of untrustworthy entities and under export controls sends a clear signal of China's readiness for a more extensive confrontation with U.S. economic interests. High-ranking Chinese officials express confidence in their ability to manage the escalating tensions in trade relations with the U.S., emphasizing that the government possesses both the will and effective financial policy tools to neutralize potential threats. Finance Minister Lan Fan specifically noted that the central government has ample fiscal measures at its disposal to mitigate both domestic and external challenges arising from the trade conflict. Plans are underway to increase the budget deficit and issue targeted treasury bonds to stimulate business activity. These measures aim to strengthen domestic demand and support key sectors of the economy, thereby cushioning the impact of external shocks. Despite the uncertainty caused by trade tensions, China has set an ambitious GDP growth target of around 5% for 2025. Premier Li Qiang, speaking at the National People's Congress, acknowledged the complexity of the international environment but reaffirmed the government's determination to achieve this goal through proactive fiscal policies and the promotion of domestic consumption. Under pressure from external circumstances, particularly trade barriers, the People's Republic of China is demonstrating unprecedented activity in its pursuit of technological independence. The state is directing massive investments into research and development with a focus on promising areas such as artificial intelligence and smart manufacturing. The goal is clear: to reduce dependence on foreign technologies and strengthen its position in the global value creation system. In light of increasing geopolitical tensions and concerns about national security, the Chinese government has announced a significant increase in the defense budget by 7.2%. This move demonstrates a commitment to strengthening not only economic resilience but also the country's military capabilities. The escalation of tensions between the United States and China began long before the Trump administration. It culminated in the export ban imposed by China on December 3, 2024. The PRC Ministry of Commerce published Notification Number 46, establishing strict export controls on a range of strategically important materials, including gallium, germanium, antimony, and superhard materials. Furthermore, regulations on graphite exports to the United States were tightened. This move is widely seen as a direct response to recent U.S. sanctions restricting China's access to advanced semiconductor technologies. The imposed restrictions target the export to the U.S. of dual-use goods that could be used in the military industry. China has tightened control over the use of graphite, which is essential in the production of batteries for electric vehicles and in other industries. This was in response to the U.S. government's decision on December 2, 2024, which expanded export controls, denying Chinese companies access to semiconductor manufacturing equipment and advanced memory chips, affecting more than 140 Chinese enterprises. These materials play a crucial role in global technology supply chains. Gallium, for example, is a key component in the production of semiconductors and high-tech electronics, while germanium is essential for fiber optics and infrared optics. The restrictions also affect antimony, used in the production of flame-retardant materials and in the military industry, and superhard materials such as synthetic diamonds and cubic boron nitride, which are necessary for creating precision cutting tools and protective coatings. In an environment of increasing geopolitical tension, China is introducing export controls on graphite, a key component of lithium-ion batteries used everywhere from electric vehicles to energy storage systems. This move, given China's dominant position in the extraction and processing of strategically important materials, has the potential to significantly impact the global economy. The People's Republic of China controls the lion's share of global production of a number of critical elements, around 98% of the world's gallium, as well as being a leading producer of germanium and providing almost half of the world's antimony production. However, China's dominance in graphite production is particularly noteworthy, with the country supplying over 77% of natural graphite and over 95% of synthetic graphite. This dependence puts the United States in a vulnerable position as American industry relies heavily on imports of these materials. The new restrictions could seriously disrupt key sectors such as the semiconductor industry, the defense sector, and the renewable energy industry, inevitably leading to a review of strategies and a search for alternative suppliers. The escalating trade confrontation between the world's two largest economies is raising serious concerns about the stability of global supply chains and the potential for increased inflationary pressure. Experts warn that higher tariffs and export restrictions could lead to increased costs for consumers and businesses worldwide, which in turn could slow global economic growth and create additional challenges for the global economy. The escalation of trade wars, marked by the introduction of tariffs and various barriers, casts a dark shadow over the global ocean shipping industry, disrupting established supply chains. Businesses face a dilemma, whether to move their production facilities outside of China given the complexities of regulatory compliance and the inevitable increase in costs. This atmosphere of uncertainty is paralyzing companies' ability to plan and invest effectively, potentially leading to delays and even cancellation of strategically important projects. Inflationary pressure is another tangible consequence of trade battles. The imposition of tariffs on imports from key partner countries inevitably leads to higher prices for a wide range of goods, from high-tech electronics to essential items. This burden is usually passed on to consumers, fueling an inflationary spiral. Analysts warn that consumers may face immediate price increases for food, while the long-term economic consequences remain uncertain and unpredictable. The economic battles between the world's largest powers have not gone unnoticed by the planet, noticeably slowing global economic growth. In particular, experts at the International Monetary Fund, in their World Economic Outlook report released in April 2019, expressed serious concern about the situation. The forecast for global economic growth in 2019 was revised downwards from 3.6% expected a year earlier to 3.3%. Economic and trade frictions were cited as the main constraints, which could continue to negatively impact the investment climate and overall pace of development. To better understand the scale of the problem, it is enough to look at the dynamics of trade between China and the United States between 2015 and 2017. During these years, trade between the two countries showed steady growth. In 2015, total trade reached $598 billion, with U.S. exports to China amounting to $116 billion and Chinese imports to the U.S. amounting to $482 billion. Thus, the trade deficit for the U.S. was $366 billion. By 2017, total trade had increased to $635 billion, exports had increased to $130 billion, and imports had increased to $55 billion, leading to an increase in the trade deficit to $375 billion. These figures clearly demonstrate the growing dependence of the global economy on trade relations between the two leading powers and the potential risks associated with their escalation. During this period, the People's Republic of China embarked on a large-scale strategy to transform its economic model, seeking to shift from export orientation to stimulating domestic consumption and developing the service sector. This strategic maneuver was designed to reduce dependence on external markets and lay the foundation for more sustainable economic growth. Although this policy led to some slowdown in export growth, total trade between the United States and China remained robust. The commodity structure of U.S.-China trade in these years was characterized by clearly defined leading positions. U.S. exports to China mainly consisted of categories such as soybeans, semiconductor devices, pharmaceutical products, industrial machinery, and crude oil. At the same time, U.S. imports from China were mainly electronics, various equipment, furniture, bedding, toys, and sports equipment. Between 2018 and 2019, there was a noticeable escalation of tensions in trade relations between the two countries. In 2018, the United States implemented tariff restrictions on Chinese goods, citing concerns related to intellectual property theft and trade imbalances. In response, China took reciprocal measures, introducing its own tariffs, targeting American agricultural products and other key export items. This escalation led to increased costs for businesses and end consumers, causing significant disruptions in the functioning of global supply chains. In the current year, exports of American goods to the People's Republic of China reached $120 billion, while imports from China increased slightly, amounting to $540 billion. This imbalance led to an increase in the trade deficit to a substantial $420 billion. By 2019, exports from the U.S. continued to fall, dropping to $16 billion, while imports decreased to $452 billion, which slightly reduced the deficit to $346 billion. Despite the tensions in trade relations, certain categories of goods have maintained their dominant position in trade between the two largest economies in the world. Soybeans remained a key agricultural export product from the U.S. to China, although supply volumes have significantly decreased due to mutual tariff restrictions. Aviation equipment and components, produced by giants such as Boeing, were also an important article of American exports, along with cars and components for the automotive industry. Semiconductors and electronic components, including integrated circuits, continue to play an important role in trade, given the scale of the Chinese electronics industry. As for imports from China to the U.S., a significant part of it consisted of electronics, including computers, mobile phones, and a wide range of consumer electronic devices. Industrial and electrical equipment also accounted for a significant share of imports, reflecting China's role as a global manufacturing center. Furniture, bedding, toys, and sports equipment, these and other consumer goods continued to flow into the U.S. in large volumes, highlighting China's leadership in the production of consumer goods. In January 2020, a trade pact called Phase 1 was concluded between the two states, according to which China undertook to increase purchases of American goods and services by a substantial amount of $200 billion over 2 years. However, the COVID-19 pandemic that soon broke out threw global trade into chaos, and the planned purchase volumes from China were never achieved. The pandemic triggered a global economic downturn, affecting all areas, from production to consumption and international trade. Both countries faced economic difficulties, which could not but affect trade volumes. U.S. exports to China amounted to $124.5 billion, while imports reached $435.110 billion. Between 2021 and 2023, a partial recovery was outlined. The Joe Biden administration maintained some tariffs, but focused on multilateral approaches and initiatives aimed at ensuring the sustainability of supply chains. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPF, was introduced as a counterweight to China's growing influence in the region. During this period, trade volumes began to gradually recover. In 2021, U.S. exports to China increased to $51.1 billion, while imports rose to $56.4 billion, increasing the trade deficit to $355.00 billion. In 2022, exports decreased slightly, amounting to $149.4 billion, while imports reached $536.887992 billion, leading to a deficit of $42.6 billion. The year 2024 was marked by a new wave of trade and economic tensions, entailing noticeable adjustments in the political course. According to statistics, exports of American goods to the People's Republic of China showed a decrease of 2.9%, reaching $143.5 billion. At the same time, imports of Chinese products to the U.S. increased by 2.8%, amounting to $438 billion, which, in turn, led to the formation of a substantial trade deficit of $295.4 billion. In January 2025, U.S. exports to China totaled $9.9 billion, while imports from China reached $41.6 billion, resulting in a monthly trade deficit of $31.7 billion. Current trade policies and the geopolitical landscape continue to significantly impact economic relations between the two countries. Since returning to the White House in January, Donald Trump has resumed his aggressive trade policies, imposing tariffs on several countries and announcing intentions to expand this list in April. This strategy has much in common with his first presidential term, when he initiated a trade war that destabilized global markets and had a tangible impact on the U.S. economy. Historical experience suggests that a new round of tariff measures could lead to even more serious economic consequences. During his first term, the Trump administration imposed tariffs targeting China, the European Union, Canada, Mexico, and other major trading partners. Initially, these measures were positioned as protecting American industry and correcting trade imbalances, but they quickly provoked retaliatory measures from the affected countries. By 2018, a full-scale trade war with China had erupted, with both sides imposing mutual duties on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. This led to increased costs for American businesses and consumers. A study published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics showed that American consumers and companies lost $51 billion due to the tariffs, with real income losses amounting to $7.2 billion. The main burden of this fell on American importers and consumers rather than foreign exporters, as the tariffs caused price increases on a wide range of goods, from electronics to cars. The trade war also negatively impacted employment and economic growth. A 2019 Moody's Analytics report indicated that tariffs cost the U.S. economy around 300,000 jobs, particularly in manufacturing, housing, and retail. A later study by Oxford Economics and the U.S.-China Business Council concluded that by 2021, the U.S. had lost approximately 245,000 jobs due to trade tensions. Manufacturing, which the Trump administration aimed to support with its tariffs, proved particularly vulnerable as companies faced rising costs for raw materials and semi-finished products. Despite expectations, the tariff policy did not lead to a reduction in the U.S. foreign trade deficit. On the contrary, the total goods deficit increased by 21% compared to 2016, reaching unprecedented levels. This occurred because companies reoriented themselves towards alternative suppliers outside the U.S. rather than bringing production back home. If a new wave of tariffs is implemented during Trump's second presidential term, the consequences could be even more severe. The global economy, still recovering from inflation, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical tensions, may face new challenges. The introduction of additional tariffs could further increase prices for American consumers, slow economic growth, and lead to job losses. As previous experience shows, the main burden of costs will again fall on American businesses, while international markets adapt to the new conditions and find alternative trade routes. Thus, instead of strengthening the U.S. economy, an escalation of the trade war could lead to deeper economic instability at home and worsen relations with key allies and trading partners abroad. Each viewer is free to form their own opinion, sharing it in the comments. This video narrative has come to an end, and the creators express their sincere gratitude to everyone who took the time to watch. If the presented material touched any chords or served as a source of inspiration, the authors would appreciate support in the form of a like and subscription, allowing you to stay updated on further publications and be part of the community. Every viewer's contribution is invaluable. For those who wish to continue exploring the channel, we suggest you take a look at another video that is already waiting for its viewer on the screen.